Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melanie goes,
Tired.
Hey, all you mentees, Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions, and join me today for your advanced look at the Defenders Omnibus Volume 2 from Marvel Comics. So, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, before going any further, I do want to thank David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advance copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on July 11th or 12th, depending on where you get your books. What we're looking at here is the direct market cover by Gil Kane. On the left-hand side is your standard edition cover by Al Milgrom. The standard edition cover is going to be the one that's available everywhere, whereas the direct market cover is only available at places like cheapgraphicnovels.com or waltzcomicshop.com, comicsbugle.com, Dime Breed Collectors, Organic Price Books, In-Stock Trades, readscomics.com, or your local comic book shop. That's where you're going to be able to find that particular cover. So let's take a closer look at this book because everything else under the dust jacket is the same. So we have the cover here to issue number 24, and that's intact there, the Marvel Comics group, and then some of the Defenders, right? Most of the core team here being the Hulk, Doctor Strange, Valkyrie, and Nighthawk. Although this time around they're joined by Son of Satan, and there is Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Yellow Jacket fighting against the Sons of the Serpent. And there we have the Defenders. The picture down there, Volume 2, and Gerber and Buscema and the Marvel Omnibus. And for those of you that have been collecting Omnis for a long time, the Defenders Volume 1 is really what started the whole spine debacle. But as we know now, this is the spine look that they're using for the Silver Age, and I think some even moving into the Bronze Age. I haven't seen any of the Modern Age books take that particular template, but it's been mainly Silver Age and some Bronze Age. So let's look at the back here, all the covers of the stories collected in here, the retail price down here of $100, Marvel logo and the T for teens. In stories that inspired a generation of creators, Steve Gerber and Sal Buscema present the Defenders at their most exciting, anarchic, and influential. These particular stories, I think the word I would use to describe them, and I mean this in the most positive way, is weird. Yes. These were some of the most strangest Defenders, Marvel comics I've ever read. Let's look at it. Does it even have Bambi right here with Shandu? I'll explain what that, I have to talk about that story. Giving you a little bit of what Steve Gerber did, and then the creators right here. I can't believe he's been gone since, I guess it's been 2008. Steve Gerber passed away at a really young age. So did Don Heck and our pal Sal right there. Little bio on them. Same thing as Volume 1. You have the Defenders logo, Omnibus, and then the spine of the book right there, the Defenders, and the picture down here with Gerber, S. Buscema, and Volume 2, and then the back of the book showcasing the. It's really about these four characters here, although other characters pop in and out. All right, we are going to crack this book open, check out the artwork. This is the complete Steve Gerber era, kicking it off with his first issue. The mapping is really interesting, though, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then ending with his final issue on the Defenders. And, of course, talking about some of the weirdest things that he brought into this particular title. All right, let's go ahead and crack the omnibus open. We have some black end sheets right here. And this particular omnibus collects the Defenders 20 through 41, Annual number 1, Giant Size, Defenders 3 through 5, Marvel 2-in-1, 6 and 7, Marvel Treasury Edition number 12, and then material from Mystery Tales number 21, and World of Fantasy number 11, as well as Tales of Suspense number 9. So it's a really interesting collection that they added those particular issues because those were from the Golden Age, from the 50s. So here are all the credits, including the writers in here, mostly being, of course, Steve Gerber. There are a couple of fill-in writers, and then some of his friends jumped on for the giant size issues. And then the pencilers mostly being Sal Buscema. And you go through different eras of inkers, though. You mainly have Vince Colletta doing the inks, but then steps in Klaus Janson, who kind of wraps up the run of Sal Buscema's pencils, and it so stands out and it's so good. You have the letterers, the colorists, and the editors, and then your table of contents. And what they did here is include the introduction to the Marvel Masterworks Defenders Volume 3. I believe is what this one originally comes from, and you'll see it right here. Yes, from Marvel Masterworks The Defenders Volume 3. This is an introduction by Roy Thomas, written in 2012. And yes, by now, Steve Gerber had passed away. Now, this isn't put together perfectly like the Marvel Masterworks, meaning that it doesn't line up perfectly with the Marvel Masterworks. If you bought Marvel Masterworks 1 and 2, you can't just jump into this, because I think Volume 3 starts with issue 17 of the Marvel Masterworks, and this starts with issue number 20. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say I'm going to be talking about some spoilers about some of the stories in here. I realize that these stories are, from the 70s, from like 1975, but still, people want to enjoy it for the first time. I completely respect that. So if you want to put me on mute, or if you just want to jump to the part where I talk about the extras and the build of the book, by all means, skip around to that. I don't want to ruin this for anybody. All right, for anybody else that has already read this or just doesn't care about spoilers, minor spoilers really, here we are with Marvel 2-in-1, The Thing and Doctor Strange. So this is issue number 6. And this is Steve Gerber writing this particular issue as well as the follow-up. So Marvel 2-in-1, if you don't know what that is, that was the title that they had back in the 70s. Kind of like the Marvel team-up book. Marvel team-up had Spider-Man with a particular character that wasn't getting a lot of love, a lot of recognition. So they kind of teamed them up to put a spotlight on the character. And every issue he teamed up with somebody else. Marvel 2-in-1 was the same thing, except this time around they use the Thing from the Fantastic Four, the most popular character, to team up with lesser known characters. Like I say that like Doctor Strange, but really at the time Doctor Strange didn't have. Did he? No, he didn't. I don't think his comic was right about to launch. I believe his next round of comics. So this kicks off a storyline that really focuses not only on Doctor Strange, but also this young lady named Barbara, who is Valkyrie, and her relationship with her father, and what's going to happen, and how the relationship is about to change. All of it leading into the actual Defenders storyline of issue number 20. So it's team up number 6 is Doctor Strange with the Thing, and then team up number 7 is the Thing with Valkyrie, even though it's a continuation of that story. And the story continues into Defenders number 20, and here you're introduced to the rest of the team. And like I said, it's mainly these 4 characters right here of Nighthawk, Hulk, and Valkyrie, as well as Doctor Strange. But it wasn't the first few issues that Steve Gerber wrote. I think the first issue that he wrote, according to the introduction by Roy Thomas, was actually the giant-sized Defenders number 3. That was the first issue. So the way this is mapped is they start off with the Valkyrie storyline. And it's a good story. It's her trying to find herself because she doesn't have memories of her past. She doesn't know who she is. She knows that she's married, and this guy named Jack is coming around and, claiming to be her husband, and she doesn't know exactly what to do with that information. And this is the first issue right here that he wrote, but it is placed after issue number 22 of the Defenders, or 21, sorry. This is the story with the Grandmaster, and there's some heavy reading through these early issues. And a lot of these stories I've read for the first time through this omnibus. Like, I remember having was it the Essential Defenders Volume 1? But it didn't cover any of these issues. And I've read some of these, like the ones that are collected in the Guardians of the Galaxy omnibus, or now the Epic Collection. I've read some of the Defender stuff that's was previously in here, but not all of it. Especially probably the most weirdest story. That one I only knew about because I worked at a comic book shop for a couple of years, so I heard a lot of people talk about it, and I always wanted to read it for myself, and I finally got around to reading it. But let's talk a little bit more about the stories found in here. One of the things that Steve Gerber was known for doing, especially in the pages of Howard the Duck and, of course, Man-Thing, was kind of writing in a social commentary about what was going on around his particular world. So this particular story really hits close right here with Valkyrie realizing like all these things that are happening around this neighborhood in New York, including like this rat that's just sitting there with a baby. This leads into the Sons of the Serpent story arc right here, which are a radical group that see her as a traitor because she's a blonde woman and she's siding with the minorities, if you will. I don't know why I did a quote unquote. They flat out tell you exactly what this is. And I mean, they even go to the point of like crucifying her, which is a pretty dark story to tell in a Marvel comic during this particular time. But Steve Gerber was kind of crossing all kinds of lines. Yellow Jacket has a really cool story in here. He's not just teaming up with them, but he adds a certain element to the team. Son of Satan shows up from time to time. The letter pages are all intact. And before I get to the story that I'm talking about that is really weird, I do have to talk about one of the most strangest creations in Marvel Comics. And that is this little character right here. And let me get to him right now. There we go. The elf with a gun. I think he is notorious throughout Marvel comic readers that have been reading comics for a long time and people trying to guess exactly what he was. But just to kind of give you a little bit of info on him, in about, I think there's 3 or 4 issues that he appears through these pages here. In issue 25, he makes his first appearance. Now, the Defenders, again, are dealing with their own thing, teaming up with the Son of Satan. And we have this one-page interlude where there's a couple sitting at their home. It's this trailer home. And this little elf shows up and shoots the husband dead. And you can... probably, you're led to believe that he shoots both of them dead. And we go back to the action. Now, that little elf shows up from time to time, and that's all he does. He shows up and says hello and shoots people dead. And it has nothing to do with the actual story, what's going on, with the exception of the protest, which I'll get to here in a little bit. This is the giant, if I'm not mistaken, this is the giant size issue? Yeah. Giant size Defenders number 5 right here, which reintroduces people to the Guardians of the Galaxy. Because the Guardians of the Galaxy were first introduced through the Marvel Presents issue number 18 by Arnold Drake and Gene Colan. But they weren't being utilized by anybody. And then Steve Gerber decided to use them. So he brings them into our particular timeline. One by one, the Guardians of the Galaxy are reintroduced to the Defenders. And they stick around for a while. And the Defenders actually travel to the future to see what some of the Defenders do, not all of them. And again, through all of this, you get to see a lot of character buildup between Valkyrie and Nighthawk, because they were kind of the lesser-known characters, because Hulk already had a fan following. He had his own magazine. Doctor Strange, I think by this point, had his own going magazine. So they already were popular. The lesser-known characters like Nighthawk and Valkyrie were getting fleshed out, and he was doing such an amazing job, again, in the background of all these really interesting storylines. And I haven't even gotten to the most interesting one yet. So this is like a 5-issue story arc that kicks off with that king size number 5. There is a fill-in issue by Bill Mantlo. I believe it's this one here. Yeah, issue number 30, Gold Diggers of Fear. And Sam Granger is the artist on this particular issue. Which leads us to issue number 31, Nighthawk's Brain. So this is the one I wanted to talk about, because this is one of those strangest Marvel comics I've read. And I've read a lot of weird things at Marvel, including Trouble, but for the time that this was coming out and what they did, this is one of the strangest. It almost feels like a Doom Patrol type of story. So let me explain what happens. Okay, so Nighthawk and Valkyrie are hanging out together, and Nighthawk ends up getting kidnapped by these group of people known as the Headmen, and I'll show them here in a little bit. Meanwhile, Hulk is out looking at nature, and a deer gets killed by a group of hunters. So he's I guess he's a big fan of Bambi, and he keeps calling this deer Bambi, so he takes Bambi, because Bambi's mother just died in front of Bambi's face, and he wants to look over Bambi. So he takes Bambi back to the Defenders headquarters. Meanwhile, what the headmen want to do is take one of their villains, this guy right here, Shandu, and put his brain inside of Nighthawk's brain. And they succeed. Like, they cut open his head. Now, this isn't really shown in detail or anything, but they take out Kyle Richmond's brain, Nighthawk's brain, and keep it around in a jar and put in Chandu's brain inside of Nighthawk. Now, the Defenders have no idea what's going on. They think that Nighthawk is being possessed, so they take him to Doctor Strange. They take him to Son of Satan, and it turns out that he wasn't possessed, that he is, in fact, his brain has been switched by this guy named Chandu. Now, we also are introduced to another weird character. Even to this day, she stands out as being one of the most weirdest characters, and that is Ruby Thursday. The lady with the red orb. She's appeared in Wolverine comics. She's appeared in a lot of comic books in modern day, but this is where she got her start. So the Defenders are trying to figure out how to help out Nighthawk. And by the way, the reason why the headmen wanted to replace their Nighthawk's brain with Chandu's brain is so they could just dominate the world and the Defenders be okay with that. Because the Defenders aren't really a group of heroes that come together and are always together. They're kind of brought together because they just, what are they called? A non-superhero team book. So they only come together when there's something big and evil approaching Earth. However, Steve Gerber took that formula after Len Wein and Roy Thomas left the book and just kind of did his own thing. That he was like, well, you know, Earth isn't threatened all the time. We have to have lesser characters in here, or lesser villains in here. So, through this, you get to find out more about the character of Kyle, though, of Nighthawk. Like, about his past, and just how dark it gets sometimes, reading about it. Now, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, so what's going on with the brain? Alright, so the Defenders decide to put, you remember when I said there's a guy named Jack, and he's hanging around Valkyrie, and he claims to be her husband. She doesn't know much about her past. Well, this idea, I don't know where they get it from. They decide to take Jack's psyche and put it inside of Nighthawk, who's being, of course, possessed by Chandu. And then Chandu's brain, his psyche, into the brain of the baby deer, Bambi. So the opening splash page here is this ridiculous page of Chandu Bambi looking at the orb and checking out what the headmen are doing with the Defenders. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that Kyle's brain is out there somewhere in a jar. So there are points in this particular story, and it gets weirder. And that's all I will say. But yes, and a supervillain whose brain was put inside of a superhero. Now his psyche has been put inside of a baby deer, and the superhero's brain is sitting around in a jar. But there are panels where Nighthawk is just carrying this brain around, and it's so ridiculous. It's so, like I mentioned, like, reminds me a lot of Doom Patrol, long before Doom Patrol was even a thing. Well, I'm sorry, Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. Doom Patrol was around, I know. But, like I said, it has a really weird ending that leads into the next story arc, which is the return of another villain from the Defenders past. We have a new Red Guardian. Luke Cage ends up joining the team throughout here. And then, let me go to, actually, let me show you. Oh, I didn't even talk about, yeah. So, I really like Sal Buscema. Like, I think Sal Buscema fits the art perfectly. But when Klaus Janson takes over as the embellisher and the inker, like, he changes Sal's art. Makes it a little darker, a little grittier. But by the time these stories are being done through here to the end of the Steve Gerber run, it kind of fits the tone of those particular stories. There's the Red Guardian again. This is the... Is it the Hangman? Okay. So, what ends up happening here, and again, Klaus Janson working on that, is after issue number 40, we have this issue right here. This is annual number 1. And by the way, issue number 40 is also has another cameo of this little guy right here. The elf with a gun. Now, this one is the one that actually ties a little bit to the Defender story with the protesters. Like Hulk had just ended up leaving this protest rally, and that's where the elf shows up. So it ties a little bit, at least more than any of the other elf with a gun stories in here. Like I said, there's only 3 or 4 in here. And yes, another writer came in after Steve left the book and did their own thing with the elf. And sadly, we lost Steve Gerber, so we'll never really know what the intention of the elf with a gun was. So back to this. So what ended up happening is Steve Gerber was notorious for writing storylines as he kept going every month. He didn't have a big plan. Like some writers, are like, oh, okay, I've got a year's worth of stories. I know where it's all going to lead to. Steve Gerber just kind of had fun with the book. And, well, he said in an interview that the hardest thing to write was the next issue or coming in the next issue because he didn't have an idea where these stories were going to go. Now, keep in mind, he wrote from issues 20 to 41, but I don't think that flew really well with editorial at the time. So when issue 41 came out, that became the end of the Steve Gerber era. And there were some things that looks like they were rushed to be tied up. But annual number 1, the way this is read, feels like this was supposed to be 3 or 4 issues. So I feel like this is what tied up a lot of loose ends. And this was supposed to be a continuation of his run, including the Nebulon story that he started off. But issue 41 was his final issue right here. Again, Sal Buscema and Klaus Janson working on the book. And I think that's all I will say about it. I talked about the issue 31, Nighthawk's Brain enough. So let's look at the back matter and welcome everyone. Oh, actually, no. We do have to talk about what else is in here, because we also have the Defenders meet Howard the Duck from Marvel Premiere. What is this, number 12? Yeah, this issue right here, which is Marvel Treasury Edition number 12. So this is them meeting Howard the Duck. Another amazing creation by Steve Gerber, and if you've not read it, you need to do yourself a favor. It's solid. You also have the first appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy in here. And I think the reason they kept it in this omnibus was because they kept that in the Marvel Masterworks. I'm glad it's at the end. Chronologically, yes, this is supposed to be read before the King Size number 5, but it just doesn't add anything to the story other than, hey, this is the Guardians, and they're from the future. And you also have these stories right here. This is what I was talking about, the Weird Wonder Tales. This is actually a reprint of these stories from the 50s. So this is where some of the characters that he uses in his first story arc first appeared. So it's really cool. Like Shandu right here, the headman that I was talking about. This is where he borrows from. And then you have some original artwork back here, including cover art right there. And then this is a John Romita design of the new Red Guardian. And this cover right here shows an early version of the Marvel Treasury Edition. And then the end sheets. The other thing I forgot to mention is when dealing with the Guardians of the Galaxy storyline, is that he's the one that created the character of Starhawk. So Starhawk just appears in this particular story and ends up joining the Guardians of the Galaxy. So he ends up joining Martin X and Charlie 27 and Vance Astro and the character of Yondu. But yeah, he's the one that created him. All right, let's talk about this binding. So the book has 704 pages, and it is sewn binding. This is what the eye looks like. Not that big of an eye. But there weren't a lot of spread pages then. Actually, let me see if I can find one. Okay, so this is an example of how spread pages were done. And they're not all like this, but they were separated by frames right here. So this is a connecting page. They're separated by frames around the art. So it's not really what spread pages are these days. I think when people think of spread pages these days, they think of art like this. So here's a perfect example. This is page 236 and 237. And there is some gutter loss, so you do have to hold it down to see the entirety of the art. And it's also a good example to show you what the bleed through looks like on lighter colors. So colors like here, which, I'm sorry, this is lack of colors. I meant colors here, like this light blue. You can see the word bubble coming from the other page, the frames. It feels like the paper stock is a little thicker than Defenders Volume 1. So actually, let's go back to something like this particular page, which has a lot of white. So you do see a frame, and you do see a caption box. Now, the caption box, I think, comes from... Okay, yeah, it does. Comes from this particular opposite page. So whenever there's a lot of white or light colors is when you're going to see some of the bleed through. Some people notice this stuff. Others don't or don't care. But I do want to be as thorough as I can be with my overviews. Like, you see a little bit of the checkerboard from this page here. Right there. But that's it. That's the Defenders Volume 2. Teased by David Gabriel 3 years ago and finally out. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if this is the route you're taking, if you have the Marvel Masterworks, or if you're waiting around for the Epic Collections to collect this particular era. And if you've read Steve Gerber's run on the Defenders, what you think about it. Is it as obscure and just strange as I made it sound? I happen to really enjoy it. A lot of these stories were new to me, so I had just heard about them, so it was really cool to experience them for the first time. So that's it for me. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.